What happens when a regional conflict doesn't stay regional? We're seeing it play out right now, as a clash between the US and Iran is rapidly spinning out of control, threatening to pull the entire world into its orbit. So today, we're going to trace the ripples from that single initial event and see just how far they've spread, and the consequences are shaking the entire globe.
And it really all starts with this one statement from the White House. Just think about that for a second. Not a negotiation, not a settlement, but complete surrender. It's an absolutely uncompromising stance that immediately sets the stage for a conflict with unbelievably high stakes. The trigger, the event that kicked this all off, was the assassination of Iran's supreme leader. But what happened next wasn't some contained, tit-for-tat retaliation. Oh no, it was a series of ever-widening ripples, pulling in new countries, new players, and escalating the crisis at every single turn.
Okay, so first, let's zoom in on the epicenter of this crisis, the direct conflict between the US and Iran. Because right from the get-go, the objectives coming out of Washington were, well, they were surprisingly and maybe even dangerously all over the place.
And this is where things get really murky. On one hand, you have the president talking about this huge vision, unconditional surrender, total regime change, even saying it's going to work just like in Venezuela. But at the exact same time, the Pentagon and even others in the White House were publicly saying, no, this is not a regime change war. Their mission, they said, was much narrower. Just take out Iran's navy, their missiles, and their nuclear program. Two completely different goals for the very same conflict.
Now, according to US and Israeli military sources, those more limited, tactical goals have been met with, frankly, tremendous success. They're claiming to have wiped out 60% of Iran's missile capabilities, sunk dozens of naval ships, and done serious damage to the nuclear program. The result? A massive 90% drop in missile and drone launches from Iran.
But a conflict like this almost never stays contained, does it? The first major ripple spread almost immediately, igniting a brutal, devastating second front right on Israel's northern border in Lebanon.
We're talking just hours. Hours after the supreme leader's death, Iran's most powerful proxy, Hezbollah, unleashed a barrage of rockets from Lebanon straight into Israel. And just like that, Lebanon was dragged into a horrific conflict that so many of its own people wanted no part of. And the human cost was just staggering, almost instantly. Evacuation orders for southern Lebanon and the suburbs of Beirut forced 500,000 people to flee their homes. That's a massive humanitarian emergency, creating what one reporter on the ground described as just chaos and panic.
And the price has been incredibly high. Lebanon's health ministry is reporting over 200 people killed as Israel hammers Hezbollah strongholds. And make no mistake, Hezbollah is hitting back. Their rocket fire has left multiple Israeli soldiers seriously injured. Okay, so the next ripple is the one that pulled in the superpowers. All of a sudden, what was a regional war had the world's most powerful nations choosing sides, and that changed the entire geopolitical landscape overnight.
This was a total game changer. Sources started revealing that Russia was actively helping Iran by feeding them intelligence on the location and movements of American troops, ships, and aircraft.
So let's be really clear about what this means. This is no longer just a US-Iran conflict. You now have Russia, a nuclear power, feeding Iran satellite imagery to potentially target American assets. And on top of that, China, another nuclear power, is reportedly thinking about sending financial aid and even military components to Tehran.
And all of this geopolitical maneuvering, as you can probably guess, creates another massive shockwave, this time through the global economy. And this is the ripple that hits home for pretty much everyone. The Strait of Hormuz, think of it as the world's main artery for oil. About 20% of the entire planet's oil supply flows through this one narrow channel. And right now, it has ground to a complete halt. Tankers are just stopped, too afraid to move, and the global energy market is in a full-blown state of alarm. And that alarm translates directly to what you're paying at the pump. The national average gas price in the US has already jumped by 34 cents, hitting the highest level we've seen in the president's 2 terms. And look, this isn't just a small bump. US crude oil surged 35% in a single week. That is the biggest spike in over 40 years. One analyst even warned that if this isn't resolved, oil prices could blow past $100 a barrel and maybe even trigger a recession. So finally, let's look at the devastating toll this is taking inside Iran itself, and the really deep political fractures this war has exposed back home in the United States. While the strikes are supposedly targeting military sites, the human cost is mounting fast.
A human rights agency is now reporting that over 1,000 civilians have been killed in Iran since the bombing campaign began. And these aren't just abstract numbers. Verified reports paint a harrowing picture. Hospitals in Tehran have had their windows blown out, with patients, including newborn babies, being evacuated amidst rubble and chaos. And in one absolutely tragic incident, a school in southern Iran was hit directly, killing over 160 students and staff.
Meanwhile, back in the US, the public is deeply, deeply divided. And this is historically unusual. Polling actually shows that a majority of Americans opposed the military strikes from the very beginning of the conflict.
As one political analyst put it, this is a remarkable political gamble. It appears to be the first time a president has taken the country to war without a clear mandate from the American people, and without even a real campaign to try and build that support.
Which, of course, brings us to the central, unanswered question that is looming over this entire crisis. With the conflict spreading, with the economic and human costs skyrocketing, and with a public so fractured at home, it's the question everyone is asking. What exactly is the endgame?